So I'm super excited today because we have our awesome friends and partners with One America hosting the call today with Brian Giles, the Regional VP of Tax-Exempt Markets. And we have our RPAG member, Allison Kaler-Flink, the Senior VP of Retirement Advisory Services with NFP, to share how you can grow your practice in the 403B and 457 markets. So Brian, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Leah. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for your time and joining us here over the next hour. So hopefully you all find some valuable information as we talk and explore, opportunities for financial advisors in the 403B and 457 market and the broader tax-exempt markets. So my name is Brian Giles. I'm with One America, as Leah mentioned, part of our practice leadership team over our tax-exempt markets at One America. Each year, about a third of our new business comes from the market segments that we're going to talk about today. And joining me, as Leah mentioned, is Allison Kaler-Flink, financial advisor with NFP. She has a wealth of experience and knowledge in this marketplace, over 25 years supporting the defined contribution and defined benefit marketplace. And I don't think Allison will be offended when I say she is an ERISA geek. I mean, she advertised on her LinkedIn, in my defense, on her LinkedIn page, she even says that, she lives and breathes ERISA. So if you live and breathe ERISA, I'm sorry, you're an ERISA geek. But I guess so.
I'm okay with that, Brian.
Yeah,
I'm okay
absolutely.
with that.
Same here. So thank you, Allison. She's been a great partner here of ours at One America. And we've asked her to join this call because she obviously can add a lot of practical advice and experience in terms of, how she's supporting her not-for-profit clients and prospects. So Allison and I are going to kind of go back and forth here, and she's going to chime in and offer some of her thoughts as we work through the presentation. So just from a real quick, from a flow standpoint, I want to do just a quick overset of and review of the overall marketplace, the types of plans that we're going to run across, the various market segments, and then really spend a little bit more time talking about where we find great opportunities for you as financial advisors kind of to add value to these organizations, and then kind of wrap up with some prospecting tips and tools for you all. So with that, I'm going to just jump in here to the tax-exempt market overview. So tax-exempt market, it's about 1/4 of the overall defined contribution market place. So about a little over $2 trillion out of a $9 trillion market. If you look at the left-hand side of the slide that we're looking at here, you'll see kind of a breakdown based on assets of the size of the various market sectors. So these are kind of the market segments we see here in what we call the tax-exempt marketplace. So about a third of that's in higher ed. About 30% is going to be your hospital healthcare marketplace, and then 13% governmental, 8% in the public K through 12. I'll just say from a One America perspective, we are not actively pursuing or involved in the public K through 12. Different market segments. That's usually a multi-vendor. You're looking at multiple payroll slots there. That's a non-ERISA side of the 403 marketplace. We tend to spend a lot more time focusing in on the for-profit or the ERISA side of the 403 marketplace, private education. And then lastly here, the 19% other, really that's comprised of all your kind of social community service organizations, along with the religious or the church plan market. So high level, kind of an overview of what we see in the tax-exempt market. So if we drill just a little bit deeper, specifically looking at the 403B marketplace, it's a little over $1 trillion. 457 marketplace is just shy of about 400 billion. So, sizable marketplace for advisors. I think what you're going to find from the advisor side is in terms of the national record keeper providers out there that are supporting the 403B and 457B marketplace. We really don't see as many as what you're going to find in the for-profit kind of 401k marketplace. I would say there's about a dozen national providers. So we did see a lot of providers start to exit the market when we saw final 403b regs come into effect in 2009. And many record keepers just didn't want to make the investments into their platform to stay compliant to support 403b plans moving forward. So not as many national record keepers out there that you're going to find. Additionally, from an advisor perspective, what we'll see is that the Plan Sponsor Council of America every year does a 403B survey. And just about every year, this number stays the same, where about 40% of the respondents come back and say they are not working with an independent advisor. Number might seem, yeah, go ahead, Allison.
And Brian, if I could add in there, because of One America's wisdom, oh gosh, about 7 or 8 years ago, I was listening to Carr speak, and I didn't understand this as much, but if you just, and we'll talk about this later, run a list, you will see that so many of them either have no advisor, or the advisor really is an advisor. They're a broker with a product.
Right. Yeah. So that's so when we say, well, all right, how is it that many aren't? Well, when we look at kind of the legacy or the history of the 403 marketplace, a lot of insurance companies in there that have their own captive agencies, and those agents are the ones supporting the plan, which again, these plans are now subject, since we had the final 403B regs, many of these they're subject to ERISA and that fiduciary oversight. And that's where the breakdown really starts. And that's where all of you on the line here that have dialed in, all you advisors, I mean, that's where you can add a ton of value to these organizations that just haven't modernized and brought their plans up to speed where they need to be. So it could be a direct relationship, but then, from an advisor standpoint, what I like about it from this marketplace is a couple things. One, when I'm talking to advisors across the country, just about every financial advisor supports a 401k, right? They're in the for-profit world, they support the 401k market. When I turn that and say, all right, do you have any 403B, 457 clients? I'm going to be generous here when I say maybe 1 out of 10 advisors say that they work in that market. So from the advisor perspective, there's just not as much advisor competition working in the not-for-profit markets. And the fact that we have so many that are working directly with a provider, there is a need for more and more advisors to come in, leverage the work you've done on the ERISA 401k side, because we need those same services on the ERISA 403B side. And I think the good news is, when we look at some of the trends on the right side of the screen here, we're seeing more and more sponsors, that are very open and they want to bring on and hire an independent advisor. We do have some advisors that, kind of common question that comes in is, all right, well, if maybe there isn't an advisor, there aren't advisor fees built in, am I just going to add cost to the overall solution? And Allison's shaking her head no. And honestly, what we find is in a lot of situations where we see a direct relationship, that's plan sponsors still in a very old legacy contract. And in those contracts, we still see, I promise you, we still see almost every time I look at one of those, you're still seeing fund fees, around 1%. They have revenue sharing still in them. And then on top of, maybe an average of 1% fund fee, we're looking at a 1 to 1.25%, wrap fee or asset fee. So all in, these contracts are 2.25% regular. That's what we see. So there's a lot of opportunity for an advisor to get hired on, run some due diligence, walk them through kind of an RFI, RFP process, and you're able to add your fee into the equation, but ultimately find a new provider that's in a more modernized contract with much more, with much more responsible fee structure. And you're able to actually add your fee and still lower overall cost to these organizations. So don't let, the fear of, if there isn't an advisor, maybe my fee is going to even cost, increase the fee structure. Because generally speaking, that's not what we see. Other trends that are just different if you primarily focused on the for-profit marketplace or that 401k market. When you're working in the 403B, 457 marketplace, you're going to find that most of these organizations, and we're going to highlight what types of markets we're talking about, most of them are going to have, or a lot of them are going to have multiple defined contribution plans. So you're going to see more than one plan type. In the for-profit side, single 401k plan, that's what they use. All benefits are kind of generated through that single K plan. Over here in the not-for-profit world, very common, you're going to see 403B, maybe a separate 401A plan for employer contributions, and potentially even adding a 457B top hat plan. We're going to, as we kind of work through the presentation, we'll walk through why that makes sense and the opportunities that exist for sponsors, but then also for you as advisors to kind of help these organizations take advantage of the fact that they can leverage multiple plans and they can use that to be very effective in their plan design. Administrative outsourcing. Allison probably, she consults with a lot of not-for-profit clients. If we think we have thin HR departments in the for-profit side, that's even much more magnified when we look at the not-for-profit side, right? Most of your nonprofits. You go ahead.
Also, so thin, but when you go into these firms, especially the small to mid-sized ones, I'm not talking like, you know, big national hospitals, but they don't have the expertise. They usually grow into HR from other areas of the organization, Brian. So
Right.
they really need help here.
Absolutely. And again, that's where a great opportunity for all those advisors to support them. Make sure, I mean, it might even start, we're not even talking about maybe moving to like a full outsourced 316. Some may like that type of model, but we're just talking about, are they taking advantage of the record keeper's administrative outsourcing tools and features that could just be, you know, outsourcing, approving loans, distributions, you know, those tasks that just, you know, might free up additional time from a human resource perspective. Plan design, key, and just there's so many opportunities to add value as an advisor from a plan design standpoint, especially around helping organizations retain and recruit talent. I would say probably I'm having more of those types of conversations in the last 18 months than we did prior. It's just a really hot topic in terms of seeing nonprofit organizations really checking out and seeing what can they do from a plan design standpoint to, you know, maybe target key individuals within their organization to reward them and retain them. And we're going to talk about some of those options and what could be done as we move through the program. And then lastly, financial wellness. I think it creeps up. We see a lot of it when I look at, you know, your not-for-profit employers. It's typically a very highly educated workforce, right? So a lot of higher education degrees, and not uncommon. We see a lot of folks that are challenged and struggling with just larger outstanding student loan debt that comes into play, and they're wanting to partner with an advisor to help walk them through just various, you know, the core financial wellness opportunities that they probably weren't getting in that direct model with the record keepers they've been working with prior to that. So just some key trends that we see emerging within this marketplace. So real quick, looking at the plan types, I mentioned multiple plans are very common. So when we look at not-for-profit organizations, you'll see here from the slide, they actually can adopt and sponsor all these plan types that you see here. So we see 401k plans, any for-profit, any not-for-profit. So any 501c org, there's like 30 subsections of 501c. They can sponsor a K plan. Don't see it very often in the governmental, and for a governmental entity, they would have had to have a plan in place prior to 86 and then, you know, had to have been grandfathered. Moving on to the 403b side, that's where, you know, any 501c3 as well as public schools and churches can sponsor that. But you'll see here, I mean, a 501c3 not-for-profit can sponsor a 403b or a 401k. So you will find organizations that have a 401k, some will have a 403b. We'll talk about, you know, is the 401k the right fit? Sometimes it might be, sometimes it might not be the right plan design for a not-for-profit organization. Then you'll see pretty much all entity types can sponsor a 401a. And then we have two different flavors of 457b plans. You have those sponsored by governmental entities, so your states, municipalities, et cetera. And then you have a non-governmental what we refer to as a top hat 457b plan. So this is for any 501c organization is eligible to sponsor a top hat 457b plan, along with some non-qualified church-controlled organizations. So your traditional steeple church plans and church-controlled organizations, they are not eligible for a top hat 457, but a non-qualified church-controlled organization is. I have an example of that right now. We had a religious affiliated senior living home. So they actually are church plan status. They have a 403b plan that's in transition coming to One America today. And they talked about, hey, we would like to be able to save a little bit more for our executive director. And we're adding a 457b top hat in that particular scenario, which adds ability to put more dollars away for that particular individual. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but great plan design option.
There's a question. Should we save questions to the end, Brian? Or if it's pertinent to the slide, should we try to answer it?
Yeah, in terms of that, I was gonna, so we've got one of my One America colleagues, Matt Asher, is monitoring the Q&A. I think
okay.
We're definitely going to address those at the end. He was going to chime in and let me know if he wants to address it now. We might hear him chime in. If not, we will hold those.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
Thank you. because I'm not seeing those questions. So thank
No,
you.
you're on a roll. I'm learning. I'm loving this.
All right. So we just talked about all the various plan types that you see, and we talked about how, a nonprofit organization, having that flexibility to adopt multiple plans, can really help from, there's a lot of plan design flexibility we can have here. And so here, busy chart, really what I want you to get out of this is you'll see far left side, we go from a 401k plan all the way over to, what we call a church plan, which is generally a 403b plan. We can see a 401k creep in. But you'll see here from the far left, most of you all familiar with all of the compliance rules and testing that come along with a 401k, the ADP test on the employee deferrals, ACP on matching contributions. So really subject to, the whole litany of compliance testing rules. And as you work from plan type, kind of from the far left to the right, you'll see there's more and more flexibility. So some of these rules start to, fall away. So there's more flexibility for a 403b plan. There is no ADP test. What does that mean? Well, that means if you have a nonprofit that has a 403b and they have highly compensated employees, they can defer the $22,500 and you don't have to worry about that ADP test and refunds coming back. So that may be one reason. That prior slide, I said you could have a 501c3 org, right? A nonprofit. They could be in a K or a B. They might have been put in the K because the financial advisor they're working with only knows the 401k market. So we put them in it. Or the record keeper they're working with only does 401k. So they didn't say, hey, 403 might have more flexibility. So you could have a nonprofit in a 401k. And if they have highly compensated employees, now they potentially have testing issues that they wouldn't have had in a 403b plan. And then again, as you move forward, you just see a lot more flexibility because there's fewer and fewer compliance testing rules that come into play. And the other key thing in this is these plan types, why we see multiple plan types and why it's very effective from a plan design standpoint is these 401k, 403b, 457, they are not aggregated for testing purposes. So they actually have separate 415 limits. So 401, so if I'm a not-for-profit and I sponsor a 403b, has a $66,000 defined contribution, 415 limit. And then if I have a separate 401a, that's a separate $66,000 415 limit. And then if I have a 457b, now that's a separate $22,500 limit. So within the defined contribution space, you could actually really structure some significant contributions put away within this type of structure. And that's why I say there's a lot of plan design flexibility and opportunity for advisors to, consult and work with either their current clients and or prospects when we talk about this from a plan design standpoint. So here's just
Brian,
common. Yeah, go ahead. We had a question.
Brian, real quick, just on that previous slide, it's actually a great place for a question that we actually have in the chat, which is,
sure,
are there a significant number of clients that you see that are misplaced in 401k plans? And if so, what benefits are there of moving them to a 403b?
Yeah, so we will talk about that. It's a facts and circumstances. I'm not going to make a blanket statement and say the 401k is not the right fit all the time, at least from my perspective in being able to, consult and work with clients. But if they have highly compensated employees, usually, the ADP test comes into play. So really their solution is, if that organization is happy and they want to make a safe harbor contribution, and they're going to make that level of employer contribution, then they can turn it into a safe harbor. And if they don't mind the vesting part of it, then it's really not a big deal. However, if they don't want to make that type of employer contribution, right, well, then it might not have been the best fit for them. And maybe the added flexibility of a 403b. However, and not to get too technical, this is the ERISA geek stuff coming out, but once you're in a 401k plan, we usually have conversations if it's a nonprofit. So let's say it's a 501c. I had mentioned a 501c org can sponsor a 457b top hat. Usually we lead them down. Will the 457b top hat, if you add that to the 401k because they're eligible to have both, that 457b top hat adds an additional $22,500 contribution for your highly compensated employees. That option might be better because right now, today, you cannot merge a 401k and a 403b plan. Caveat being, unless you're a church plan, and sneak preview, we're going to talk about that opportunity down the road. But if you're not a church organization, you can't merge the two. So once you're in the K,
And
you got to terminate it if you want to get rid of it, and then you could start up a B plan. But that, Allison's probably just getting ready to talk about maybe some of the challenges and that we see when you terminate, and a lot of the money might flow out of the plan. You get a lot of
so that's
yeah.
the geek in me, because
Yeah.
I run into Brian plans that are in the wrong type of plan for two reasons. One, the vendor they chose didn't have a 403b, so it pushed them that way.
Right.
Two, the broker they used didn't know the difference. Years ago, because I've been doing this now 33 years, and yes, I'll say that in a happy way. I love what I do. I am a geek, as we said, the geeky part of us, right, Brian?
That's right.
Where you run into it and they just, are in the wrong spot. But I also am very concerned when you terminate a plan of the bleed, because people don't do things in their best interest.
Right.
Especially when money's involved, or if someone's saying, or take it over here, even if they roll it over. So there are strategies to do this. And there's different ways to strategize. But you can talk about that more, but I do run into it all the time. A lot of times they have no idea why they're in one plan or the other. And the biggest reason to not have to do that ADP test is if you don't want to do automatic enrollment and you don't have good participation at the bottom. So there's many reasons, and it's part of that consulting approach. First you got to figure out why they have what they have before you can walk forward and figure out what else can we do. And I love the 457 overlay approach, because it fixes the problem.
Right. And that's, yeah. And for that particular question, whoever asked that or others that are interested, if, we could obviously have a lot more dialogue around that. So if your local One America sales rep, please reach out to them. They can connect myself or anyone on our team that could also, have a deeper conversation around, is it the right fit? What are the pros and cons,
because your
et cetera.
team at One America, Brian and Matt, have such a deep bench in this that you shouldn't be afraid to approach these clients or prospects, because you might not know what you don't know, but you've got a team there that has their back. So I think that's a wise way to recommend them to do that.
All right. Well, thank you. The check's in the mail, Allison.
No check needed, Brian.
So these are some of the typical multiple plan structures that we see. So 401A, 457, commonly see that with governmental entities, 403B, 457 top hat, with your typical not-for-profit 501c3 org. I talked a little bit about the three plan opportunity, 401A, 403B, 457. We see that with some dual status organizations. So they're both a 501c3 org, plus they have governmental status. So we see this with some governmental rural hospital healthcare organizations, special districts have both dual, governmental plus 501c3 status. And those are probably the best clients to work with in terms of the pure flexibility, because they're not subject to ERISA. So you can really get creative in terms of how you steer and direct contributions when you come into that type of a situation. So market segments that we look at. So try to run through these at a little quicker clip here, but really 5 market segments we focus on that kind of fall into what we broadly talk about in terms of tax exempt, which is your hospital healthcare. So hospital healthcare is that one market where we creep into the for-profit side, right? We do see 401k, we do see, we have seen not-for-profit hospitals start to gobble up for-profit medical practices. So we definitely see both not-for-profit as well as some for-profit in hospital healthcare. But then the rest of this is really more of your nonprofit side of things in the 403B, 457, whether it's educational entities, social community services, religious organizations, and then lastly, government. So those are kind of the 5 market sectors that we at One America really lump into broadly tax exempt markets and what we're talking about today. So the hospital healthcare marketplace, we talked, one of the, in terms of assets out in the marketplace, very sizable, just kind of real in terms of shaping the market size for you, the advisor. There's about 4,500 hospitals, across the country. But then when you look at nursing care, residential facilities, there's about 90,000 nursing homes across the country. So a lot more opportunity. And then if you look at just medical practitioners, professionals, so your doctor's office, dentist's office, et cetera, there's about 450,000 of those across the country. So we see that as a really good opportunity, just from a numbers. They're in local communities, right, for advisors to support and work with. And hot buttons here, we certainly see an interest in administrative outsourcing, the multiple plans. So we can get creative in terms of plan design flexibility. In that hospital healthcare marketplace, M&A is still going on. We see that very prevalent. And then kind of the last, maybe a little bit more unique feature where we see it maybe a little bit more usage than you would in other industries is self-directed brokerage accounts. Typically we see, physicians, sometimes senior, whether it's the C class within a larger healthcare organization may also want to leverage the self-directed brokerage account. We're going to talk about maybe in terms of solutions, we're going to talk about maybe a unique aspect that we see with self-directed brokerage accounts in terms of solutions down the road. But anything you wanted to add, Allison, just in terms of kind of what you're seeing in the hospital healthcare marketplace from an advisor perspective?
If I was an advisor in all of you that's with us today, in your backyard, I'd go to look at groups between 20 and 300-400 employee groups. You'll find there that when you go to some of these community health centers, local medical centers, municipal hospitals, that they really need your help, as well as some medical practitioners, because they don't always put together what's best for everyone. And with their tools at One America, especially talking about self-directed brokerage accounts and doctors, you're able to put together a program that's going to meet everyone in the plan's needs, and give them that oversight as an advisor, because I'm a member of RPAG also, Brian, and with the tools and everything we see as members of RPAG, we're able to really bring that together. So I'd look in all those areas. I'd stay away from super gigantic hospital groups. If you're just, I don't even go there, Brian, and I've been doing this a long time.
Sure, understood. All right, moving on. Social community services. I mean, these are your charitable organizations, associations, museums, historical societies. I mean, from an advisor perspective, I mean, we see there are about 2 million not-for-profit organizations registered in the United States. So just from a numbers side of it, there's a lot of it, right? So there's a lot of opportunity in terms of areas that we see advisors being able to help these not-for-profit organizations. One is also something, again, a little bit maybe unique to the 403B world, because we don't see this in the 401k side of the marketplaces. You still see, and it gets back to how we talked about, some of those that are in direct models working with, their provider, and there's not an independent advisor. Typically, we find them in some very old legacy contracts and or investments. And so, what does that mean? Well, in the legacy 403B world, a lot of times that means that the sponsor might be in an individual contract as opposed to what you may be more used to, which would be a group contract that we see on the 401k or for-profit side. So it adds some challenges, it adds some fiduciary concerns for all those ERISA 403B plan sponsors that are in individual contracts that, generally speaking, in an individual contract, the plan sponsor, the fiduciaries of the plan, have limited control over those underlying individual contracts, and it's a participant decision. So for instance, underperforming fund, right? Plan sponsor, it's an ERISA B plan, they have oversight. There might be 200 investment options inside an individual contract, and half of them may be underperforming, and yet that plan sponsor does not have the opportunity or the ability to swap out a fund, right? They can't close and map because they don't have control over those particular assets. So we definitely see starting point is an advisor coming in, kind of freezing those individual contracts, freezing contributions to those contracts, opening up a group contract, and having future contributions go there, and then work on moving those individual contracts to the group institutional contracts. That's kind of a best practice that we've seen. And even though this really came to light, we started seeing this kind of 2009, the last decade or so. There's still too many 403B plan sponsors that are stuck in old legacy contracts, and they need help from advisors like all of you on the call here.
Well, and for those of you that are scared of those legacy contracts, Brian's group has a great team out in the field to help go deal with all that paperwork and contract transition services. That really they're one of the few firms that will get back into the trenches with you, and not just pass it off, Brian, which
Right.
means you can really help with those, not just from getting it to one place, but those legacy contracts are so ridden in fees and people don't even know it.
Right.
So just helping our fellow, citizens get to a better place to put their money to work for them it's like a passion of mine. I feel like when you're dealing in the not-for-profit space, all these people are really in the service business. They're serving their community, they're serving their patients, they're serving their students. And I kind of take it like we have to serve them back and help them.
Great point. Moving on, educational entities. So get private schools, universities, colleges. I made a comment earlier, again, at least at One America, we do not focus on that public K through 12. That's non-ERISA world, multiple provider. A lot of times you'll see, 6, 10, 15 different, payroll slots or payroll providers
How
that
do
are
we deal
available.
with that, Brian? It's crazy.
Well, we
How
don't.
does payroll deal with
I
it?
think-
That's crazy.
Right. Well, it's, in personal opinion, it's a disservice to our educators, because I'm not a big fan of that structure. I typically find it being a little bit more expensive. And, these organizations never can get scale, right? When you have your employees deferring to 5, 10, 15 different places, you just don't get the scale that you can when you move to a single vendor. And there are some states that allow for a public K through 12, a school district, to move to a single vendor. And so there are situations we have partnered with some school districts that have been willing to go single vendor. So we do have some, but that's far and few between. There's a lot of states that actually still require that there be more than one, provider or vendor in the district. So we stay away from
I've
that.
done it once and I got them to one vendor and then I finished the project and walked out. And luckily they're in Oklahoma. They're still there at one vendor, but
Sure.
boy, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. So again, that's where we do see the multiple vendor structure within this. And actually we even see the multiple vendor structure. You'll even see it in your, higher ed. So, kind of the last bullet point there, Allison, when it refers to just a lot of the, ERISA class action lawsuits that we see in the private higher ed space, where, a lot of times some of the challenges there are that, assets are maybe with 2 different providers, and therefore, the sponsor may not be, getting best pricing out in the marketplace because, they have assets spread across a couple different places. And, I know one of the tools available for RPAG members is a plan fee kind of tool for benchmarking purposes that can come in and be leveraged. I mentioned it, I put it in here just because, we have been seeing it was just a few weeks ago, we saw another ERISA class action lawsuit.
And the plan fees tools is amazing. I don't know if anyone uses it on the call because I don't have a list, but we use it every day. And I actually use it in prospecting because you're showing private schools run their 5,500s, take the fees if they're over 150, whatever. So they, if they have to file a full 5,500 and you find it in the audit report, Brian, then run it through plan fees and use that as a door opener. It's really effective.
Yep. Terrific. Thank you. All right. Religious organizations. So this is probably
Don't get political here.
Right. No, we will. More so kind of religious organizations, church plan market. This is probably more of a niche play, but yet, there's churches, synagogues, there's religious affiliated organizations, in every local community, and it's an opportunity for for advisors. What makes them a little bit different is they're generally always going to be non-ERISA retirement plans, unless, so this is the one, a church plan or a church organization, they can opt to be covered under ERISA, but they actually have to make an affirmative election, and they have to do what's called a 410D filing, which is a statement that they would file with a 5500 to elect ERISA coverage. But we just don't, practically speaking, we just don't see many church organizations or religious organizations file to be covered under ERISA. Where sometimes it might make sense is if they have a defined benefit plan and they want PBGC coverage for the DB plan, then they may file, to be covered under ERISA so that they have that. But generally speaking, if you run across the church plan, they're going to be non-ERISA. And we'll talk about maybe that opportunity, because there are times when we see we work with advisors and they run across the church plan and they're filing a 5500. You say, all right, well, did you ever elect to be covered under ERISA? No. Well, why are you filing a 5500? Why are you paying for that? You're not subject to ERISA. You should not be filing a 5500. So just a kind of a planning and an opportunity for advisors to just help guide, some of these plan sponsors that maybe have gone down the road of following ERISA when they shouldn't. Also within the church plan world, there's some key features, provisions. One of the kind of hot buttons is a housing allowance for ministers. So most ministers know, they can take a tax, as they make, as they're earning money, the part that's allocated towards their housing allowance
It's
is
called
not taxable.
parsonage.
There's a
It's called
yes,
parsonage.
parsonage, housing allowance. We see it both. Yes, we see it both ways. What not all retired ministers take advantage of is when they retire and they actually want to take distributions out of the retirement plan and out of that 403B plan. They can actually take out distributions that are attributable to those housing costs.
Really?
Tax-free. And so not many know that. And so if they're retired and they still have $10,000-$15,000 of housing costs, they might not be in the parsonage at that point. It can come out tax-free. And a lot of organizations, they may not report that correctly on the 1099-R. So we have a specific process form that kind of drives to make sure we get accurate tax reporting on the 1099-R for that pastor, so that it shows up as a non-taxable distribution. But that's kind of a hot button. And usually if you're an advisor and you're working with a local church, usually that minister or the pastor is the one they're the decision maker. So this is something, and you tell them or educate them, you can actually take money out tax-free. Probably going to get their ear and get their interest rate there. PATH Act mergers. So I made a comment earlier where we had the one question. All right, if I'm in a 401k, but I'm eligible for a 403B, what are my options? I made the comment, you can't merge the two plans, right? Unless PATH Act, which was passed in 2015, PATH Act allows for church plans and only church plans to actually merge a 401k into a 403B. So we have worked with several church organizations that were in a 401k plan. They had ministers, they were that are highly compensated employees, and the 403B plan, maybe that was just a better plan design for them, and they didn't have to terminate the 401k and worry about money being distributed and rolled elsewhere. We've actually worked with them to actually merge the 401k into a 403b and then have that 403b plan as the ongoing plan. So unique opportunity just for church organizations. But again, if you have an organization that is maybe just challenged, the 401k is not the right fit for them, this can be a very effective way to get them into a 403b plan and solve some of those challenges. And one of the other unique aspects, and we see it with religious organizations because they're non-ERISA, is this post-retirement contributions that are allowed in a 403b plan. So 401k plans, if you have somebody retired, I think you can make some contributions for a year after they retire. 403b plans are a little bit different, where they actually allow for the organization to make contributions 5 years after somebody has retired or separated from service. So that comes into play. It's a great plan design. We've worked with numerous church organizations where they have a senior pastor looking to retire, and they come to us and say, we want to save a lot of money in this 403b plan, but we only have a few years to do it. And sometimes we can talk about, all right, well, you as the organization could actually make contributions for 5 years after that pastor has retired. So just I get it, it's niche, but we've worked with some church organizations where I had one that came to me and said, we've got 5 years and we want to put $750,000 away. We haven't done anything for the pastor. We promised them we'd have a retirement plan, and we could get creative and actually get pretty darn close to solving for that challenge that they had. So lastly, market segments, governmental entities. One America, from our perspective, we focus a lot more kind of on local government where there's local decision making. We find that a really good opportunity for advisors. So towns, counties, your police, fire, sheriff, housing authorities, those types of governmental entities. There's about 90,000 local government instrumentalities across the country. So there's just a lot of them and a lot of opportunity for advisors. Some unique features of within the governmental market. This is where we see it's a direct market. So you have a lot of the legacy or the providers that are in the governmental marketplace. It's been a direct model. So they may, again, there's not an independent advisor there. We typically see 401A along with 457 plans. So multiple plan structure. Why is that? Well, in a 457 plan, there's a $22,000 limit, so single limit, and the employee and employer can contribute to it. However, all contributions count towards that limit. So if the employer is going to contribute into a 457B, it really limits how much that employee can defer into it. So typically you'll see 457B for just the employee deferrals. That way anyone can max out to the 22,500 limit, and then a separate 401A, which actually has a completely separate 66,415 limit, and all employer contributions can be driven into that 401A. So that's why you would typically see a 457 401A. And then we certainly see a lot of, just defined benefit plans come into play too within the governmental structure. All right. So I want to spend a few minutes here just kind of highlighting and talking about, areas in the market where we see for advisors, all of you advisors that are on the phone, to kind of add value for these organizations. So first and foremost, I talked about recruiting, retaining, rewarding. Our experience has been we're having more and more of these conversations, and it's actually an opportunity where you can add a lot of value and solve for a lot of the business challenges that these nonprofits are having around retaining top talent. And one of those areas we've seen advisors, focus and have some success is really just highlighting the fact that any 501c org can have a 457B top hat plan. There aren't that many record keepers out there, that support this. Therefore, they're not out talking about it. So this is not a plan design that's talked about much in the marketplace. And so there's still a ton of opportunity, going back to, again, those eligible employers. You could see a 501c and not-for-profit. They could be in a K plan or a 403B plan. And adding a 457B, I'm going to advance a slide, and then we're going to come back to this and kind of run through it. But I did want to just spend for all of you on the line here, advantages of a 457B top hat is what I refer to it as a really low cost executive compensation plan, because when you set this up, it's a separate $22,500 limit. So this is above and beyond what they could do within the 403B or 401k. So you kind of see it on the chart there on the right. Highly compensated employee can max out their deferrals in the B or the K plan. Separately, they can max out their deferrals if they want in a 457B top hat. So you just effectively doubled what they could defer. They can defer up to $45,000 this year in 2023. Or we see, and so we do see some organizations say, why not add a 457B top hat? Because it allows my highly compensated. It's because you do have to limit participation in a 457B top hat to a select group of management. So it's really those key employees, highly compensated employees that you have to limit participation to. But those are the ones that typically the decision makers, and now you approach them and say, hey, here's a way to put more money away. But then we also see some organizations that want to just retain key employees, and they want to make an employer contribution into it. And again, these are 457 plans they're non-ERISA. So, you're only offering this to, your key highly compensated employees. And, you can be discriminatory in terms of those types of contributions that you make to it. So if I'm an organization, I can make a $10,000 contribution to highly compensated employee A. I can make 0 to employee B, and then employee C, I could do 22.5. I could max them out. So there's a lot of flexibility, and at least from One America's perspective, we're able to add a 457B top hat at virtually like no cost. We'll do the plan document. When we have the existing 403B, 401k, we have a streamlined, we just have the record keeping system streamlined for this. So it's at like virtually no added cost to the sponsor to add this. You can really solve for a lot of what we find nonprofits asking for through this simple plan design of allowing an additional 22.5. I mean, if occasionally we'll have go ahead.
No, especially because a lot of these people are behind in savings. So you're
Correct.
trying to keep them there because they're in your leadership. The cost of changing from that person and finding another leader is very expensive to the organization. And most of these people getting to that point in their career and now being able to replace the income they're at retirement for their lifestyle, they got to play catch up. So this is a great solution. And I'm just blown away that you do it for no fee and no document fee. Right now, I'm just amazed, Brian.
Yeah, well, thank you. All right, well, I'm going to move on in the interest of time. But again, I would just urge anyone on the call, reach out to your local, One America sales rep, and they can connect. They can answer a lot of these questions, or they can connect myself or someone on the team just to have further dialogue. That's what we'd love to have further dialogue around any of this. Other kind of discussion points for advisors, just kind of out in the marketplace. One thing I just want to point out: 403 PEP, right? Obviously, that was part of Secure 2.0. But what nobody's really talking about when we talk about 403B PEPs is getting back to the fact that we said you can't have a 403B, 401A, throw in the 457B top hat. You can't commingle and have all those plans covered under a single plan type, right? So you can't merge those. So if I'm and we talked about how very common in the nonprofit world, we see organizations sponsor more than one plan type. Especially the larger the sponsor you go, the odds are the more likely they have multiple plans. So if I'm a sponsor and I've got a 403B, 401A, and I like this PEP, concept, I can't put both of my 403B and 401A in a single PEP. I actually have to adopt a 403B PEP product, and then I separately have to adopt a 401A PEP product, and I have to, manage both of those. That's clunky in my mind. And again, there aren't a lot of folks talking about that unique aspect and how that's different than what we see in the 401k kind of PEP world. And so One America, we've designed our record keeping platform for organizations that have multiple plans. It in essence streamlines the ongoing administration. When we have multiple plan types, we can price plans, leveraging the assets of both. So there are other options out there. That's really all I wanted to get out and get advisors thinking about is, in the 403B PEP world, when you have an organization that has more than one plan type, I don't think that's the best solution. And I think there's better solutions out in the marketplace. The self-directed brokerage account. This is more of we see this in the professional service with professional service orgs. From our perspective here at One America, we see it from a tax exempt or healthcare. We see it with medical groups, right? Allison's come across this where, you're working with a physician group. Not uncommon, right? The physicians want to invest in SDB in a self-directed brokerage account, or they want to work with their personal advisor. And they want that personal advisor to manage their brokerage account. So the scenario is you've got core assets with provider A, and then you may have 5, 10, 15, physicians that have their own brokerage account custodied somewhere else with their personal advisor. And it causes all kinds of fiduciary challenges. It causes audit problems because, you're not getting certified audits. Trust statements, and so you're in a full scope audit versus limited scope audit. In at One America, we actually do have a unique solution through our trust custody partner Matrix, where we actually have electronic linkages with all the various custodians, so we can actually manage the whole process and everything can flow through One America. So all contributions can come to One America, and then we can route those monies to the held away brokerage accounts. And it solves for a lot of the fiduciary exposure out there. It allows to get to a limited scope audit and lower audit fees. And so, single payroll. So they're sending all money to us versus I'm sending money to, the core provider, and then I'm sending 5, 10, 15 checks to all of these brokerage accounts that are out there with these with their physicians. So it's again a kind of a niche, unique play, but it's actually a pretty streamlined solution out there.
It's amazing because I'm using it now, and one of the biggest complaints with doctor groups like this is where's their election? What did they elect to do? And where's their beneficiary form? And having a single sign-on, even that it's linked to their trusted advisor, pick whoever you want, has really made administration for the reduced HR and finance teams of these organizations actually breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah. I know we're kind of pushing some time here, so real quick, the church plan. So we've seen advisors in terms of just prospecting, finding ideas is, finding a church plan that's filing a 5,500 and following up with them, asking them, why are you filing a 5,500? Did you elect to be covered under ERISA? If not, you shouldn't be filing that. And so advisors can work with those church organizations to either move to a non-ERISA 401k. They can still be in a K, and the 401k can be non-ERISA, but the document, most of the times the plan document needs to be restated, making sure you're stripping out all of that ERISA language, getting them to file a final 5,500 to get out of the, to stop filing the 5,500. Or again, the other alternative is if maybe the 403B is a better fit for that organization. And again, for church plans, they have that unique opportunity under the PATH Act to actually merge. So again, we work with numerous organizations in that. And then lastly, this was actually after, not part of Secure 2.0, but some recent changes to the Form 5500 audit changes. And actually, we kind of see it as a fairly big deal within the 403B space. Is used to be in terms of who's required to file a large filer, therefore have to go out and get that independent audit, which can run $10,000, $15,000. The rules just changed. So we used to count participants based on anybody that was eligible. So if you're eligible, even if you're not deferring, you don't have an account balance, you're still an eligible participant. So you're in that plan count, right? So a lot of folks, maybe they didn't have great participation, but yet they were eligible. So you have 150 eligible employees, but only 75 had an account balance. Well, they were subject to the large filer audit because they had over 120, that were eligible. And in the 403B world, what's unique is 403B has a feature, something called a universal availability. So universal availability in essence means, all employees, there's some exclusions, but for the most part, all employees are eligible to defer into the plan day one. So they're pretty much a participant day one. That's why we don't see that ADP testing back on that early plan design chart, but they're eligible day one. So 403B plans historically would have a lot of eligible participants, but not that many account balances. So now what's changed under these audit rules is it's changed from an eligible participant to participants that have an account balance. So going back to that example of organization that had 150 eligible, only 75 that actually had an account balance, which you might see more in the 403B world than the 401k world because of the universal availability feature. That's an organization that an advisor can approach and have this conversation around, well, are you aware rules have changed, beginning in 2023, we're probably past it now. So now we're really planning for the 2024 year. But, making sure that they're aware it's based on the account balances, and they might not have to file a large file, be a large filer. Therefore, they don't have to have that expensive audit. So you can save them some real dollars, just making them aware of this particular change. And there hasn't been a lot, at least from my perspective, there hasn't been a lot of dialogue around this change because it happened after Secure 2.0, and there's just so much going on with Secure 2.0. That's where, if you're reading about, any article in the press, it's usually Secure 2.0 related and not so much focused on the changes to the audit requirements. All right, prospecting. So real quick, in our last couple minutes, I just want to highlight a few tools. Oftentimes, when we're working with the advisors, they'll talk about how, all right, maybe sometimes because if whether they're non-ERISA or they don't have to file a 5500, we don't always have a 5500 that we can pull up on them. Are there some sites that we can go out just to try to find nonprofits in our area to have conversations with? So a couple of sources, and this deck will get sent out, so you'll have access to these sites. But there's a good site for Melissa Data that actually allows you as an advisor to look up any nonprofit by zip code. So we've seen advisors, you go out there, it's a free resource, plug in the zip code that you want to look at it, and it's going to pull up every nonprofit that's registered within that zip code. So at least helps you identify those organizations. And then if you want to find additional information on them, something unique again to not-for-profits is most not-for-profits have to file an IRS 990 form. And so there's this site called candid.org, free site, allows you to go up and pull up the 990 that a nonprofit has filed. And in that, here's just kind of a view of what that 990 looks like. But there's some pretty key information from an advisor perspective that you can pull up. And not only, it gives the mission, it gives a lot of the financials of that nonprofit organization, but it also gives you some information around all of their current officers, directors. They have to list every key highly compensated employee along with the wages. So, if you're looking at a nonprofit and you're wondering, is that 457B top hat, do they have some highly compensated employees that might benefit from that? You can go out to candid.org, find their 990, and you can look up. And if you see, all right, well, they've got 3, 4, 5 individuals that are, making over 150K or what that you think they may benefit. They might want to put additional dollars away, or they may be restricted in, if they have a K plan, they might not be able to defer the max. They may be a good candidate to have that conversation about adding the 457B top hat. So you can get some really good information off of that 990. And I just a lot of advisors aren't aware or familiar that this filing is out there. And it's an annual filing that every 501c has to file outside, except for governmental entities. So that's kind of the end of the canned remarks. If we have a minute or two, we'll have Matt come on and ask some questions. So I know we threw a lot at you. Really our hope is that you would, reach out to your local One America sales director. They can answer questions. They can bring in myself or other colleagues that support our tax-exempt marketplace. We've got 60 years of experience in the not-for-profit market. We really work alongside you. We work with advisors, as much as possible. We make, when we're working with clients, mutual clients, we're highlighting your brand. It's all about you as the advisor supporting them. It's not about One America. And then we just have a lot of tools that are available to you. So I'm part of our practice leadership team, happy to get on phone calls, with just you or prospects, clients, to just talk through what their options are, if there's other strategies out there that make sense.
And I can tell you firsthand, like I've pulled a 990, got an EIN, then pulled the 5500. I think everyone on the call knows what I'm talking about. If you send it over to your sales director then and says, hey, can someone talk me through what I'm looking at here? I know a person here. Is this worth my while? They'll jump on the call probably within an hour and help you through that so you can decide, is this one for you to make a call out?
Terrific. Thanks. I'll see if Matt has questions just real quick. There's a phone number. This is for our internal sales desk. If you're not aware of who your local sales director is at One America, always you can dial in this number and they can get you connected with the appropriate party.